This happened in fall. I was working for my uncle that year. I hadn't gone to college, but I hadn't really gone to work either. All I was doing was picking up hours cleaning offices, even though I wasn't that great at cleaning offices. In my defense, Uncle Greg was pretty terrible at it as well. He went bankrupt a couple of years after this story, and last I heard, he's never really done anything since. Mom said she wasn't surprised, even when he was a kid. She said his lemonade stand used to somehow always finish in the red. On days I worked, he would pick me up at my house, usually after lunch. Then he would drive me to a building, typically an office, but sometimes a private residence. I can still smell the inside of his car, old cigarettes and styrofoam convenience store coffee cups. He always cursed when he drove. A quiet but never-ending string of deeply graphic suspicions regarding the lineage and intellectual capacities of other drivers. I remember whole rides going by without speaking, listening instead to his cursing like it was some obscene radio. After we got to the location, I would grab the cleaning products from the trunk. While he spoke to the person in charge, he would tell me where to go and what they needed. And then he was off, ostensibly to the next location. But based on his demeanor when he returned, I suspected in actuality he spent most of his afternoon in bars, while I mopped dirty office floors and cleaned bathroom windows with his generic Windex. The day it happened, he drove into a rich part of the city and pulled up outside a private residence, which caused me to groan. "What's the matter?" Uncle Greg shot me a look. "You don't like making money. I don't like cleaning houses. Already told you. The owners are so weird about me being there, like I'm going to rob the place." "Are you?" "Maybe," I said, and Greg let out a half-laugh, half-cough. "Fuck you. Get in there and clean. You got nothing to worry about. And I might be a little late picking you up. Got a job across town." I nodded and got out of the car, grabbed the supplies, and then walked around to the open driver's side window. "So when will you be back?" "Soon as I can. Hopefully 6. He peered at the time on his dashboard. "I talked to the girl in the house. She knows I'll be there. Once you're finished, just hang out." "Hang out? What do you mean?" But Greg was waving me off and rolling up his window, driving away and leaving me standing alone on a quiet city street, the shadow of an old row house falling over me. I rang the doorbell and I heard it echo, after what felt like forever, but was probably only minutes. I heard the distant sound of footsteps behind the door, and then the whirring clicking of the opening of the door itself. "Can I help you?" She was older than I was, late 30s, early 40s, and she was rich. Expensive black clothes and silver jewelry, but it was more than that. Rich people look different when you get close to them. Their skin glows. Their eyes are bright. Even old rich people seem healthier, like they're another, more advanced species. But she wasn't that old, or, at least, she didn't look it. "I'm from the cleaning company. Like I said earlier, my uncle typically did the talking. I always felt uneasy speaking directly with the customer. In this case, even more so. I forgot that was today. Where is my mind?" She peered at me from behind her oversized black-framed glasses. "Let me invite you in." The house was all white inside, bright vanilla walls and gleaming pale floors. The living room was long and narrow, the glittering kitchen at one end and floor-to-ceiling windows at the other. They were open, and the slender white wisps of curtains fluttered in the breeze. I felt idiotic in there. Like my walking in, my uncle's cheap vacuum strapped on my back was some sort of stupid joke I didn't quite get. We cleaned telemarketing offices and suburban ranch homes. This wasn't that. This was way over my head. Trying to figure where to start, I noticed her staring at me. As she studied me, I had a strange sensation, almost like a combination of a sudden headache and the way you feel standing at the top of something very tall. There was pressure and my legs went weak, but just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. She looked at me and told me I could start whenever I liked. I should do the first floor first. She settled down at a long and low white leather couch with a laptop as I began dusting. Whatever the odd feeling had been was gone, and I tried to forget the strange groping sensation that had wormed its way through my limbs and into my spine. I was only there to clean, I told myself, so get that done and get out. I turned my attention to the row of knickknacks on the shelf. Greg told me this job was a basic clean level 1 of the 3 services he offered. A basic clean got the customer dusting and vacuuming of up to 4 rooms and 2 bathrooms cleaned. No mopping. The good thing was, that meant this house would be done quickly. Unfortunately, that was the bad news too. I didn't expect Greg to be back anytime soon, and the last thing I wanted was to sit awkwardly in this woman's house while waiting for him, so I decided to take as long of a time as possible. Usually when I dust, I barely even notice things, but since I was moving at such a glacial pace, I couldn't help but focus. And I couldn't help noticing that the things that were on the accent wall were really fucking weird. There was a little snow globe, the kind you shake and fake snowfalls, but instead of a village scene, there was a graveyard. Next to that was a lock of white hair. A black and white photo of what was obviously a wake, showing an open casket in a living room, but all the people standing around were wearing masks without any expressions painted on them. A single white glove. A candle holder that was made of some unfamiliar, smooth white material. Polished silver circles that may have been earrings, or maybe rings, but for some reason I felt like they were neither. An alabaster button with a black shape on it, a symbol like an asterisk or an exploded dark star. And then, bizarrely, what appeared to be a children's toy, a shiny little black matchbox truck. After dusting, I vacuumed. Most of the times I do that the client leaves the room. The vacuum we use is loud and annoying, and most of the time I turn it on. The client leaves the room. She didn't. She just stayed firmly planted on the couch, her legs crossed and folded under her, the flickering of a video from the computer reflecting on the lenses of her glasses. I moved around the room, sneaking glances at her when I could. I was struck by the way she seemed frozen, like she was a statue or a painting of a person, something immobile that life moved carefully around, hoping she wouldn't wake up. Eventually, I had to go behind the couch to clean. She still didn't move. I kept moving, getting closer to her, convinced at some point she was going to stand, but she didn't. The whine of the vacuum seemed especially high-pitched and painful until I was finally behind her. I looked at what she was watching on the computer screen. I recognized the familiar YouTube page, but not the video. A man stood on an empty stage, wearing a tight dark black suit, far too small for him. The video frame cut his head off, so only his body was visible. Walking up from the audience to the stage were rows of people, dressed in bright white suits and expressionless white masks, just like I saw in the photo of the wake. I watched them walk toward the man in the suit, and I felt a deep, overriding panic come over me. Whatever was happening, I knew, shouldn't be seen. Not by me. Not by anyone. I had just managed to catch the name of the channel, and then the laptop was slammed shut. The woman turned around to stare at me. She seemed to look suddenly different, much older than before. She stood up and left the room. As I finished vacuuming, I tried to think of anyone I knew who could come pick me up. I couldn't think of anybody. I tried to tell myself everything was fine, that my uncle would be there soon, that nothing that strange had happened yet. That's the last thing I remembered. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting on the couch. The light in the room was different. My face felt wet, and when I touched it, my fingers came away sticky and red. I stood up. I wasn't wearing my vacuum, and I felt dizzy. I looked at the ivory room all around me, disoriented by the sensation of awakening in an unfamiliar place, for a second not recognizing it. Then the woman from before walked past me. Had she been behind me? I had looked but not seen. But there was something wrong. She looked the same as when I first saw her, but somehow much younger. She walked into the kitchen and pulled a gun from a drawer. I stood for a moment, unsure as to what had happened, what was happening, what I should do. In that moment, she lifted the gun and put it against her temple and pulled the trigger. The noise echoed, and the white room turned bright red. I felt vomit rise in my throat, but I managed to choke it down. I stepped toward her body. I saw her legs spasm. I didn't know what to do. I was alone in a stranger's home, and something very horrible had happened. I knew I shouldn't be in there, that I had to get out, and I would. I rushed to the door and opened it. Uncle Greg pulled up moments later. He popped the trunk open, and I dumped the cleaning gear into it. I got in, and he looked over at me, his eyes bleary from drinking. "What the hell happened to you?" I pulled down the sun visor and stared at myself in the mirror. Blood from my nose clotted all down my face. I pushed it back up. "I don't know," I told him. The car seat felt cold and real in a world that suddenly didn't. Greg told me he found the ad for cleaners on Craigslist and that they requested one person under 25, male. They PayPal'd him the money before I even went. He hadn't thought there was anything weird. He was sorry, he said, if things had been weird. The YouTube channel wasn't there when I looked for it. I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. I kept Googling for videos that sounded like the one she was watching, but I didn't find anything. A few days later, I saw the article. A death of a prominent local woman. There was a photo of her. An old woman in big glasses. It was the same woman I had met. I'm not writing her name because if I did, you would recognize it. She was a career politician. Not famous, but well known. She sat on boards, worked for think tanks. Her husband, also deceased, had been a prominent figure at the State Department. The obituary stated she died at home from complications from a fall. The funeral was listed as open to the public. It was raining at the graveyard. Not a hard rain, just a slow and cold November drizzle. The others there were all in long black coats with big umbrellas. Most of them were older and white. They all looked rich. I recognized a congressman and other faces I just couldn't quite place. People I have seen on panels on CNN. I was wearing a black suit, my only suit. My dad had bought it for me in high school, saying the only suit you need is black because it covers every possible event, job interview, wedding, or funeral. He was right. I fit right in with the other mourners, or at least I thought I did. The ceremony was short. Someone made a speech. The rain tapered off. When it was over, everyone walked away, across the wet and dying grass, back to the parking lot. Halfway there, I felt a light touch on my arm. "Excuse me." I turned around. A man with short brown hair and deep dark eyes stood behind me. He was in black, with a white shirt and black tie. I had noticed him earlier. "How did you know her?" My breath caught in my throat. This was exactly what I had been worried was going to happen. They find me, they know I shouldn't be here, but then what do they do to me? She helped my dad out years ago. He always told me that I wouldn't be around if she hadn't pulled my strings. I didn't know her, but when I saw she had died, I shrugged. I figured I owed it to my dad to come out, pay my respects. I hope I didn't offend anyone. I couldn't tell if he thought I was funny or if he was upset. Finally, his lips turned slightly upward, indicating it was the former versus the latter. You didn't offend anyone. She did a lot for everyone. She would have been honored. She meant a lot to him. I felt terrible lying like that, but I had come up with the story just in case I was confronted. Hopefully I would get out of the conversation soon. You don't have to lie, you know. What? My breath stopped. We all know. Why you were here. Who you are. They didn't think it was important enough to talk to you, but I did. I couldn't say anything. It was hard to breathe. People like you don't normally do something like this. I was impressed. People like me? I couldn't believe I was able to speak. Witnesses. They don't like what they saw. They never want to see it again. Did you want to see it again? I shook my head. I just wanted to know what happened. I saw a man walking away, turned back to look at the two of us. I saw the way his eyes were growing in his face, too big and too white like car headlights or twin full moons. Oh no, that's not for you. You'll never know that. And that's a good thing. Trust me. He stepped closer to me. He smelled like pine trees, cold and permanent. Have you watched the YouTube channel? I went to the URL, but it was gone. That's a pity. It moves around. He pulled out his pearl-colored pocket square. I saw a tiny black star embroidered into it. He dabbed my face and showed it to me. Maybe you'll find it one day. The white cloth was stained with my blood. He tucked the fabric back into his jacket. His face seemed to flicker at the edges, the way an online video does sometimes. A twitchy reminder that the image isn't always what you think it is. Nose bleed. That's a shame. Do you get those a lot? He didn't wait for me to answer. I shouldn't ever see you again. Do you understand? This was interesting, but a second time wouldn't be. Have a good life, Simon. Hope this is the last time we meet. I hadn't told him my name. He walked away, threatening to vanish in the grey, wet fog of the day, but I managed to speak before he did. Who are you? She was my daughter. He turned, and where his face should have been, there was nothingness instead, only an awful, flickering darkness visible. The strange emptiness seemed infinite, impossible. I saw stars, black stars, flaring cold and eternal. My legs went weak, and I heard his voice, but it was in my head. Thank you for being her witness. He turned away again and walked to the parking lot, where the empty black cars awaited the mourners, leaving their dead behind.